They become the keepers of vast amounts of data about the marketplace. We want to make a play to become a greater keeper about vast amounts of information about our marketplace. And the reason we came with this proposal is because we thought this was an efficient way to proceed. Thankfully, we will also have the opportunity to do further diligence. Gabby Cordova is going to be the address for questions that were not sufficiently answered today. I would ask that everybody provide her with that inventory of questions by the end of this week so that we can quickly turn around with Brian and Scott Kaufman and the J-Life team and get those answers back to the board and put the executive committee in a position to take another vote, hopefully within a matter of weeks, so that we can again stay ahead of the curve and be part of this thing as it gets out of the gate. I think it's a good thing, but if it's not comfortable for the board, then we should do something else. And there are lots of different things that we could do in data. This simply represents, I believe, an excellent opportunity for us. And as I mentioned to Tom during our short break, it's been incredibly moving to be part of the mourning process of your dad and then sadly your mom in rapid succession. They're part of our family, as you are part of our family, and we're honored to celebrate your lives in memory with you today and on an ongoing basis. It's impossible to get into the reporting that I wanted to do today without talking about the fact that the ground on which we thought we were standing a year ago, or 6 months ago even, seems to be shifting considerably under our feet. That the New York area has seen a dramatic wave of anti-Semitic attacks, not all non-violent, some of them horrifically violent, is indicative about the fact that the world in which we are doing our work is changing. And so we can't simply continue to do our work the way we always have without cognizance of that. You know, Joanne and I talked a little bit about what do we put on a visual here, because if we wanted to highlight every anti-Semitic incident in the country over the last year, we'd start looking at a pretty crowded and unsettling chart. So we picked a couple of major events to share with you. I think what we can and should expect is more. I think what we can and should expect is that it will not always look the same. I think what we can and should expect is that the notion that anti-Semitism comes from one particular place in a society is a mistaken notion. It comes from all different kinds of places. It's viral. It's insidious. It comes out when it's given the chance to come out. And when it comes out from all kinds of places that we don't think or expect that it's going to be. It's why what we've done in New York has looked entirely different from what we were dealing with in Pittsburgh or what we were dealing with in Poway. And therefore, we have to be conscious of the fact that there are going to be instances and we're going to have to react. What's impressive, I think, is the degree to which the community has chosen to act and act quickly. Those of you who were following some updates from me over these last few weeks know that I was in Rockland in the immediate aftermath of the Muncie attack with 800 community leaders, civic, political, organizational, and otherwise, and the UJA Federation of New York and the Jewish Community Relations Council of New York came together to organize the No Hate, No Fear rally on Sunday, January 5th. In reaction to that, there were reportedly more than 25,000 participants in that march and rally. Every significant political figure in New York in the marketplace was present and outspoken, saying all of the things that I think we hope that they would say. I want you to please take a moment of pride in the fact that among those participants were delegations from 23 JCCA agencies who brought out more than 1,000 people on a very small number of days of notice. And I would like to take credit that the association rallied and brought them out, but it would be inappropriate to do so. We certainly offered our encouragement to people to come, but they were already making plans to be there, and we at the association were proud to be there together with them. I think that we can anticipate that in the weeks and months ahead, there are going to be a lot of new initiatives. There are going to be a lot of ideas that if we do this, or if we do that, or if we invest in the other thing, We're going to be able to blunt the significance of what's happening in this unsettling side of our society. And I want to take one moment to reflect with you about those things that are legitimately within our power and those things that are not remotely within our power. The Jewish world has a reflex that when something happens, good and often particularly bad, if we can create the funding and resources and throw the time and attention at it, we can overcome the issue or make a big dent in it. Those who are students of history for more than 15 minutes know that anti-Semitism is something that the Jewish people has been trying to control somehow for the better part of a couple of thousand years. And we never have. Not a single time. So it doesn't mean that there aren't initiatives worth pursuing. It doesn't mean that greater community outreach and engagement with our peers in the religious community and the ethnic community are not appropriate. In fact, we do that pretty good already as a JCC system. And it doesn't mean that more isn't a good idea. It is. And it was a good idea before we started facing this current anti-Semitic dynamic. And it will still be a good idea long into the future, irrespective of how that dynamic unfolds. But it would be a mistake if we allowed ourselves to believe that if only we do the right things now and pivot on all of the other things that we do, we can make it go away. We can't make it go away. We can demand that the responsible parties in our society do what they are responsible for doing, which means law enforcement, which means capitalizing on freedom of the press and freedom of speech to make sure that our voices are heard, which means not cowering or hiding or trying to somehow imagine that it's only Jews who look a certain way that are drawing attention to themselves or have been too outspoken about their politics or something else that are the reason why we have this issue. Again, we have a 2,000-year history that shows us in chapter and verse that any reason is a good one, any opportunity might be taken advantage of, and the only way to blunt it is for society to command the end through enforcement and through taking seriously the things that need to be taken seriously. So what's within our power is to be devoted citizens, organizational, religious, ethnic, national citizens of this great society, and to do well what we do well, which is to promote and enhance the work that we do with the wider community. But it's not likely to be the people that we're engaged with in the community that are going to be our biggest problems. So let's also remember that if we can't own the resolution of the problem, let's not pretend that we can. Here's what I know we can do that is fundamentally within our power. In every instance in the history of the Jewish people, when those who were opposed to us came at us with anti-Semitism, the weaker the fabric of our community, the more vulnerable we became. The stronger the fabric of our community, the more resilient we became. We need to be strong and we need to be resilient. We need to pull together. So all of the things that we do to make Jewish communities stronger and greater and more vital and more dynamic, those are the things that we have to do. And redouble our commitment to doing them more and better. It is probably the single biggest asset that we have, is to devote ourselves to that as the best way to respond. We can't blend in and go away. We know that that doesn't work. So let's stand tall, draw ourselves together, acknowledge the fact that there is much more that unites us than divides us. And oh, by the way, the anti-Semites will remind us about that in spades. They don't care what we do to pretend we're not who we say we are. They know exactly who we are. So we might as well use that to our advantage and pull together. That's the town square. That's the meat and potatoes of the work that we do as community builders. And that's where we need to devote ourselves. Strengthening Jewish communities, strengthening Jewish life, and being an increasingly robust engine for pulling us together. That's what I have to say on this very important topic, and it's not enough. And I hope that perhaps tomorrow during our open forum with the board, we'll have a chance perhaps for a wider conversation. But this is the drumbeat that I think we need to be undertaking for ourselves, at the local level, in our communities. This is a time to be stronger, and I think that we are fully capable of doing that. I want to move on to the bulk of what I hope to say to you today with regard to an update, and I'm going to try to do this as efficiently and briefly as I can. I'm looking at 2020 as the third full year, certainly of my tenure as President and CEO. 2018, year one for me, was a year of education and planning. It culminated in this room in the fall of 2018 with the introduction of the Beyond 2018 operating design and vision. We spent 2019 in pursuit of the new design, assembling the team, many of whom you'll have a chance to meet and engage with in the coming days, and we continue to assemble the team. So I want to take a moment to acknowledge the most recent hires. Gabriel Most, who will join us in about 10 days' time as our new Chief Experience Officer. Gabe was supposed to be here with us today, but as life has it, he's got two ailing parents and he's in attendance to them in North Carolina, and we're expecting him back later in the month. You have not necessarily been noticing Ben Golden, the man behind the camera. Ben is our new videographer and photographer. This is a big step forward. We had subcontracted that work out for the last several years at considerable expense, and we brought in an expert to help advance our agenda. So Ben, welcome on behalf of JCCA Association. Nick Tosh, who you will meet tomorrow, came to us from the Shorefront Y to be the new manager of registration administration for JCC Maccabi. That rounds out that team. And Jane Herman, who we have lured away from the Union for Reform Judaism to be our senior writer, to fill a role that Marla Cohen left already several months ago and that Joanne has been filling remarkably well in her absence, will round out our communications team. We have two open positions left to finish out the work. One is a coordinator for our digital co-op. This is work that we're doing to support the websites, actually already of a couple of dozen JCCs, and will allow us to build out expansively our support for the field in supporting website positions, and a coordinator for special events. You've all seen Indy Coleman here, who's our director of conferences and events. Indy is in the back. Nice to see you, Indy. And Shlomo Schwartz, who we worked with for the better part of the last couple of years and left us for what he perceived as greener pastures. We are working hard to find a successor for him, and I expect an announcement will be made shortly. With the team largely assembled, I asked Joanne to help me to see if we could concoct something that would be a representation of the evolving org chart of this organization, and I think it's important to pause here and share with you what we are trying to express. We are entering our 103rd year as an organization, and yet we are very much in startup mode. Startup organizations do not have rigidly defined hierarchical org charts. What we have essentially is a growing group of top-shelf talent around all of the things that you see in the colorful bars, program areas, professional pursuits, and we have at the top 4 major professional leadership areas: Chief Development Officer, Program Officer, Talent Officer, that's in the future, I'll come to that, Experience Officer, dependent on all of the people in the colorful bars. Depending on the day, and depending on the project, and depending on the initiative, the org chart will reflect a fluidity as those people are working to support each of those key senior professionals in an integrated and accountable fashion. They cannot be sequestered in one part of the organization or another and still rise to the level of support for the wider field that we need to provide. So that's the reason why when we're pulling together the best of the best to run these individual units, they will fluidly move around to the various key leadership positions that we have, which allows us all to tap into a breadth and scope of talent in a way that I don't think we really have been able to do in the past. And I'm incredibly excited about the fact that each time we've added somebody, I think we can fairly say, I would certainly say, we're adding people of the highest quality. And the acknowledgement that we're getting from the field in the main is you've added somebody of the highest quality. We've talked about that with some of the folks that are here, so I won't embarrass Sue Gelsey by mentioning her name, or I won't embarrass Jennifer Mamlet by mentioning her again in front of the room, or Brian Schreiber by mentioning him in front of the room. These are people who every time we added them, what I got was dozens and dozens of responses from the field saying, wow, that's a great get for JCC Association, and that's the work that we are continuing to be committed to pursuing. So 2020 is the first year that the team is largely in place, and I say largely again because Sue Gelsey started less than half a year ago, and Jen and Brian, who were the first on board with this new plan, have exactly 15 months and 10 days, but who's counting, under their belt. I know for some of us who've been in jobs longer than that, sometimes it takes longer to figure out what you're doing and figure out how it works with the wider field, but we believe that this is a year where the team is largely in place, where we can take advantage of the fact that our profile as an agency is up, and I'm going to come back to that. That investment in the work that we are doing in the form of fundraising and philanthropy is up, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the details of that, and that bigger leaps in the form of that stream of revenue are not on the horizon anymore, they are near at hand, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as well. We are actively, and I would say aggressively, pursuing opportunities for collaboration with agency partners beyond ourselves around the notion that the name of the game, and here I'll come back to what we were just talking about on this wider issue of anti-Semitism, or J-Life for that matter in its own diminutive way, is we are interested in greater Jewish community. That's the mission. Greater Jewish community is the mission, and in that, we need partners. We can be the preeminent engine because of our platform, but there's no way we do it alone. So if somebody else benefits from what we're doing and measurably strengthens Jewish life, we should be celebrating with them. And if our communities are not making the strides that they should make because we are insufficiently partnering with Federation or synagogues or Jewish organizations or day schools, you name it. If we're not sufficiently partnering and our communities are being held back, then we are not succeeding near to the degree that we should be. And so we are very aggressively pursuing partnerships and collaboration. We are also looking for opportunities where JCC Association, but more importantly, the JCC movement is well positioned to lead. It's not everywhere. And in this instance, I again want to reflect back to one of the communications that I sent to you back in September after I had the privilege of being invited to JCC Rockland in New York for the screening, the preliminary screening of a documentary film called There Was No Silence, commemorating the continuing effort to properly memorialize the Munich 11 and to continue a pursuit now in its 48th year of a moment of silence at the opening ceremonies of the Games for the 11 murdered athletes, and in consolation of some kind to the families, to the state of Israel, and to the wider Jewish people. Something, by the way, that we have not gotten, notwithstanding the fact that other tragedies that have befallen Olympic athletes have been memorialized immediately at the next opening or closing ceremony, and 48 years on, we are not there. So we have a chance to show that we are uniquely positioned to join hands with the families of the Munich 11 and pursue this effort. First of all, There Was No Silence, the new film, is in active release, and we will begin to have opportunities to show it at and through JCCs. I mentioned already that 2020 will mark 48 years. Anki Spitzer, the wife of murdered fencing coach Andre Spitzer, is the person most associated with this effort. Anki has now been working on trying to right this historic wrong for 40 times as long as the length of her marriage. She was married for 13 months to Andre Spitzer and has spent the better part of 48 years trying to make this right without success. And we will cross the half-century mark at a time where she and Ilana Romano and the other few people that have been working on this will be passing 80 years of age and 50 years of battling on the world stage. 2020 will mark 48 years. Let me tell you about what we've been doing, our part to date. JCC Maccabi was born in 1982, and from the first year, memorialization and commemoration of the Munich 11 was a central part of the consciousness of the Games. Beginning in 1994, a memorial program became a required component of every opening ceremonies. And in the last 25 years, the Games have been held 86 times in 57 cities, And the opening ceremonies have been attended by 688,000 people. Thanks to the JCC movement, nearly 700,000 people have participated in powerful and moving commemorations of the Munich 11. There is nobody, there is no place, there is no entity in the Jewish communal world outside of Israel that has exposed more people to this critically important issue and to a wrong that still needs to be righted. It allows us to lay claim to the leverage of our platform and scope as having been the preeminent and therefore the right platform to pursue this issue hand in glove with the families of the Munich 11. We get to draw together with them to right an historic wrong at a time of growing anti-Semitism. This is exactly the kind of thing that I was alluding to earlier. We pull together and stand up a little taller, and in the face of an environment where anti-Semitism is growing, we demand that an historic anti-Semitic crime, essentially, is righted on the world stage. And perhaps our megaphone is a little bit louder thanks to all of the folks that have gotten together around responding to the most recent wave of anti-Semitism going on here. The JCC in Rockland hosted the JCC Maccabi Games in 2012. Linda, you and your leadership did a remarkable job simply by dint of their commitment to making the Munich 11 a primary focus of the hosting of those games. JCC Rockland has done more for the cause than any Jewish institution or organization in the world in the last 48 years. They took their cause to the London Olympic Games in 2012, where because they were not permitted to participate in a moment of silence, they created an alternative press conference and demonstration across the street from the opening ceremonies. They undertook a petition drive by their bootstraps that yielded 110,000 signatories from 150 countries around the world, triggering government resolutions in the United Kingdom, in Germany, and in the United States Congress. Nevertheless, the International Olympic Committee still said no. And while there was no official moment of silence in London, Bob Costas, in calling the opening ceremonies, took it upon himself to hold a short but very powerful moment of silence on network television in front of hundreds of millions of people following the arrival of the Israeli Olympic team. It is reasonable to say that but for the JCC in Rockland County, the majority of those things would never have come to pass, and they form for us an extraordinary example of what we are capable of. So we are now working with Anki Spitzer and Alana Romano on the Berger family out of Cleveland and a number of other family members, David Kirstel and the leadership of JCC Rockland, to determine what the right way is for us to take the families of the Munich 11 into our embrace. Their families are our families, the families of JCC Maccabi and the JCC platform, and to commit that we will carry forward on this effort until the International Olympic Committee sets to right the injustice that was inflicted upon them and the refusal to acknowledge it. There's a room here for us that nobody else can fill. These are the kinds of opportunities that we are looking at. I want to talk a little bit in practical terms about where we are on the evolution of our operating model. We have talked about the building blocks, and I'm going to give you really on one foot some very fast updates here. The talent building block, you're going to hear a great deal more about tomorrow from Brian Schreiber. It is a year in the making. The talent white paper, the headlines in which we will present to you, that we will presenting more broadly to workshop at Mifgash at our gathering of JCC executives at the end of the month. We're looking to complete this white paper as a blueprint for the future of talent development for the JCC field, and then to go out and find a funder who's going to enable us to bring that blueprint to life on a durable basis. Data, we've talked a little about already. In my notes it said I should acknowledge that we approved the authorization. We've got to update that. I think what's important here to underscore the point is we don't want to go off half-cocked into the data world simply to say that we're doing it. We want to go intelligently and thoughtfully and look to get the maximum benefit for the minimum investment. That's, again, the angle that we were working at. We talked about innovation as the third building block, and we have been bringing the notions that we shared at that meeting in the fall of 2018 to life with this board, and I want to again give you just a handful of examples of what's been happening there. We undertook of the first innovation incubator at Mifgash last year, our meeting of execs. There were 90 execs in the room. They presented to 3 major foundations, Covenant, Maimonides, and the Jacobs Family Foundation. Several of those projects were immediately given investment and support. The winning project was J on Wheels, basically a mobile program space pioneered at the Aaron Family JCC in Dallas, Texas. As we speak, 4 other JCCs are in the process of launching J on Wheels initiatives. 5 others are in the pipeline. The Maimonides Fund is committed funding to allow matching dollars to be delivered to each one of those communities. That was the idea that we had sought. Zionism 3.0, which is an initiative of the Oshman Family JCC in Palo Alto, their annual conference, which is a gathering for discussion, civil discourse, around the nature of 21st century Zionism and the relationship between diaspora Jewry and the modern state of Israel, was so compelling for so many of the people from our field that saw it. We succeeded in getting some seed funding to allow us to do a think tank in Palo Alto the day after the conference this year. A dozen JCCs were present, and we're actively following up with that foundation. Now, again, I'm going to come back to that shortly. It was alluded earlier in the Donor Development and Stewardship Committee report that we have launched our first program accelerator, the Israel Engagement Innovation Fund, and I'm going to come back and talk a little bit more about that. The second, now annual perhaps, Innovation Incubator will gather in Dallas at Mifgash at the end of this month. We can proudly share with you that the Mandel Foundation, the Marcus Foundation out of Atlanta, and the Schultz Family Foundation out of Dallas will constitute our panel of judges, and they will be spending a full day with our executives. So we'll do both town hall meetings with one of the foundation representatives, with each of the size of JCC subgroups. This is an engagement that we have sought to promote by exposing the field to mega philanthropy and exposing mega philanthropy to the field, and everybody seems to really enjoy this brand new exposure in both directions. So we're very excited about that. And even as we are celebrating the beginnings, these first steps into the field of innovation, we are actively curating other innovative programs across the field. The Orange County JCC, Mirage Family JCC, and Adrian, of course, is here, has a very active J-Cares program doing volunteer work in the community. Christmas Day was a celebratory day for 600 and something volunteers that were out doing good in the community. The Tucson JCC has a similar program that was active on Christmas Day. There are others. These are the ones that have come to light for us. B'nai B'rith Camp in Oregon, which at one time was fearful of concerns for anti-Semitism in their marketplace, is now aggressively pursuing programs for inner city kids by bringing them out to the campsite during the summer. And they are now among the most celebrated not-for-profit organizations in the city of Portland on the back of the work that they're doing with inner city kids, eminently modelable. And JCH Bensonhurst, which is one of the remarkable JCCs here in New York, is doing pioneering work with a population of Russian-speaking Jews. We're not talking about absorption program for former Russian speakers. We're talking about active, educational, communal, vocational programs and initiatives targeting Russian-speaking Jews in their own language, which has a whole host of funders behind that as well. The possibility of replicating that kind of program across the field continues to offer tremendous opportunity for us. So on innovation, we're busy, and it's the bare tip of the iceberg. We talked a little bit about our signature portfolio, those major programs that we run with the ultimate intention of driving traffic through the doors of JCCs. And again, you've heard some of this, so I'll just spend a half a minute on it. That JCC Maccabi, another one of those programs headed by somebody who arrived 15 months and 10 days ago, Samantha Cohen, who came to us from Orange County, in the space of the first year, has already created the pilot that will launch this summer at San Diego of JCC Maccabi Access, which is a set of inclusion games that in the pilot year will target JCCs that have active inclusion programs for an age-appropriate population, but that we look to expand beginning in 2021. She is, well, I say this as elegantly as I can, she is busting it to line up the near-term host communities that we need in order to get over a hump that was created by the quiet years that preceded this renewal. It looks like we are going to have a sufficient number of communities eager to host beginning in 2022 and beyond to get to where we want to be, which is to have big reveals. When we announce which community has applied to host the game is going to have the honor of being able to do it. We're losing a lot of sleep over what's happening in the interim, so we're launching the Pace University Games this summer, which is another innovation. Fort Lauderdale has stepped up already for 2021. We're in discussion with 2 other communities about that as well. A lot of exciting things happening with JCC Maccabi. JWB, which has done such extraordinary work for so many years in so many different ways. Their innovative initiative this year is the JWB Jewish Warrior Birthright Trip. It will be a birthright trip under our auspices that draws participants from the military academies at West Point and Annapolis and out in Colorado. We're incredibly excited about that. And Tracy Kaplowitz, I should say, Dr. Rabbi Tracy Kaplowitz, who came to us from a very prominent Solomon Schechter school out on Long Island, as our Chief Operating Officer, is taking principal responsibility for the engagement of our work with military families and their JCCs on completion of their military service, and we've made some notable progress in beginning to set things into place. J-Response, you have heard and you will hear, but I should tell you again that we now see J-Response opportunities in places we never imagined seeing it, and on the day after Mifgash in Dallas, Texas, 20-odd members of the executive committee will be going to the Aaron Family JCC to spend half a day shaking hands and thanking the people who have been in the trenches of the recovery work after the devastating tornado that struck the neighborhood in which that JCC exists, and standing at the door welcoming the families in that community to let them know that they are part of a movement that is actively concerned and looking for ways to lend a hand. So we're very excited about the continuing work of J-Response. And I just want to come back to this issue about the experience building block, and a reminder that our notion here is that we want to maximize the gratification of the experience of being part of our movement by making it possible for us to respond to every question, challenge, issue, concern, and opportunity with the best possible person to answer that issue or opportunity from wherever they are in the field. And those of you who've spent any time with me know that I am riddled with metaphors and analogies all over the place. But my favorite one about this is that we are going from the old model of being an all-purpose in-house consulting team, which I would compare to a talented group of chamber musicians with, by definition, a limited repertoire, to becoming the conductor of a symphony orchestra that can play anything. That's the job. And the vision of Leonard Bernstein, with the passion and commitment that he brought to conducting the orchestra, that's our commitment to the field. You can't tell, but that's Gabriel Most. We'll color the hair red and it'll be paint his face in there. But that's the goal of the experience building block. And I'm incredibly excited about Gabe being here, and so sorry you didn't meet him this time. He is the single best organization professional I have ever known, and I've worked with him on and off for the better part of 20 years. You are going to be thrilled to have him here. I want to spend a few minutes talking about partnerships, because I alluded to the importance of thinking about the bigger vision. And I hope everybody saw the report that I put out in the middle of December about our having joined hands with Rick Jacobs and the Union for Reform Judaism. We gathered at the URJ Biennial in a summit on the future of Jewish early childhood education hosted by the Crown Family Philanthropies in a room of 110 funders and leading practitioners to announce that we were going into business together to address the matter of the inadequate supply of competent Jewish early childhood educators, owing to the fact that we don't pay enough, that there's no sufficient certification for them to advance in their careers, and that they are the principal logjam standing in the way of our going from between us 60,000 kids in our early childhood education programs to 100,000 kids in our early childhood education programs, not just because it's important to have kids in those programs, but because 80 to 90% of those kids represent young families. And that's the point of contact for engaging those families with Jewish life at the moment that they're making decisions about whether they're going to be in or not, whether they can afford to be in or not. We're living with the remarkable opportunity that in the main, we have long waiting lists for our Jewish early childhood education programs at JCCs, and the reform movement has remarkably underutilized capacity in terms of physical space in their synagogues. And the only thing that stands between our ability to capitalize on both of those things is the fact that we don't have enough teachers. So we announced that we're getting into it. There are a series of task forces that have already been in formation, one around recruiting, one around credentialing, one around the financial business model, and we were very honored, Rick Jacobs and I and the leadership, when Alan Solo agreed to help us by presiding over a leadership council that's going to drive this collaborative effort. So Alan, I'm thrilled that you're here. We are also beginning work, thanks to support from the Crown Family Philanthropies, with Beit Izzy Shapiro, which is a remarkable Israel-based institution that is considered among the preeminent organizations around the strategic training for inclusion programs. And those of you who are, again, tuned into this frequency know that we are probably at our weakest with regard to inclusion in the early childhood years. Early childhood programs in the main are behind the curve on being able to do that. And with support from the Crowns and our extraordinary Mark Horowitz and his team, we have begun preliminary work and have already undertaken a think tank with Beit Izzy Shapiro. And you can read this, but I'll read it and try to do it with inflection, to build a culture within JCC early childhood education to facilitate disability inclusion, supporting developmental, emotional, and physical needs for the children within JCC classrooms. If the idea is that JCCs are the town square and everybody's welcome, then we have to figure out a way to make it possible for everybody to capitalize on the welcome that we would like them to have. Beit Izzy Shapiro is not just a great opportunity for us to work with a wonderful Israeli institution. Beit Izzy Shapiro has official status with the United Nations and is working globally on this kind of strategic training. They love the fact that there are 160 JCCs in our network, which is the exact kind of scalable work that they are most eager to do. I can tell you then about the Crowns that what is underwriting this is a grant of just short of $700,000 over a 2-year period. It will allow us to create a full-time inclusion professional that will be resident on under Mark Horowitz, but as part of that pool of extraordinary talent, and we will stretch that work to look at JC Maccabi Access and other initiatives. It will allow us to pilot our work here with a growing number of JCCs, and our think tank was attended, I believe, by, I have it written here someplace, I believe by 10 JCCs, that some represented by their executives and some represented by their early childhood professionals, but it was a powerful thing indeed. It was as inspiring to the Beit Izzy folks as it was to ours, and that's a second major collaboration. A third major collaboration with which we're getting out of the gate is with the Jewish Federations of North America. You'll recall at the last meeting that I underscored the arrival of Eric Fingerhut, who had so ably led Hillel International for the last 7 years and has become an invaluable new partner. In this fall, in the interest of renewing the work of JFNA, instead of having a traditional General Assembly, like our traditional biennial, they have something called FedLab. FedLab invited not just Federation system leaders, but leaders and partners from across the Jewish community to look at some of the major issues confronting Jewish life in a new and different way. It resulted in a deep dive into 3 what they described as complex issues facing the Jewish community, with the goal of laying the groundwork for local and collective action. Those 3 areas over multiple days. You see in front of you Action for Good in the 21st century. This is the Federation's traditional social service agenda. Hashtag Engage, which is all about community building and community outreach, and the altogether obvious Jewish security and empowerment issue. And we were effectively represented by all 3 because many of us were in California with Zionism 3.0. We called upon leading colleagues from the field to represent us in these discussions. Mark Sokol, Betsy Lynch, and Michael Feinstein, and they did so with remarkable distinction, so much so that I got called from Beth Cousins and Eric Fingerhut to extend thanks for the specific contributions that they made to the deliberations there. This is another indication that we can be represented by far more than the people who have a JCC association name tag, either as a board member or a professional. Not shortly after that, Eric Fingerhut gathered the people, these very good-looking people, his photographs in front of you, for a dinner meeting in Lower Manhattan, where he led us in a conversation about alignment around opportunities to strengthen communities, particularly communities that are scuffling or communities in crisis. The goal here, and that we are currently working on, is to identify a small number of Jewish communities across the continent and to co-commit these 5 organizations to work in alignment to create a strategic response to those communities' challenges and to commit time and energy to the pursuit of the rectification of those challenges over a foreseeable period of time. It is a pilot about what happens when agencies, for the most part, that are beyond the federation system can pull together to enable and capitalize on what federations are uniquely talented to do by bringing our community building skills and abilities to bear. So stay tuned to this channel for more information on those pilots as they unfold. And finally, I arrived here, before I arrived, thanks to the challenges we were dealing with in the bomb threat crisis in the first months of 2017. I was not yet on the payroll, but had a chance to participate in the crisis response for the association. And we were wrestling with the fact that we lacked the firm basis upon which to be as expert as we wanted to be. The Secure Community Network, which was created by the Federation System and the Conference of Presidents going back now more than 15 years, when Steve Hoffman was CEO of what was then United Jewish Communities, is the platform for addressing, counseling, and consulting with the organized institutional Jewish community in pursuit of best possible standards and efforts to secure and safeguard our institutions and the people that utilize them. Sue Gelsey has taken on responsibility as our point person for professional leadership at the association. Michael Masters, the CEO of the Secure Communities Network, is an extraordinary resource. You will have a chance to meet him. He's going to be a featured speaker at J Summit. You will discover, as I did, that not only is he a graduate of Harvard Law School and the former chief of staff of the police department of the city of Chicago, but he is also fluid and comfortable in quoting and drawing upon Talmud in his interaction with the Jewish community. Stuart will rely on you for the bona fides, whether it's legit Talmud or not. I wouldn't know it sounded right to me, but I haven't done a 7.5-year study period. The goal here, we're actually working together with JF&A on the prospect of securing the resources necessary to establish a continental coordinator for security for JCCs that would be resident at JCC Association and would work in partnership with the now roughly 45 full-time security professionals that have already been retained in communities across the field and fill the gaps in the myriad of communities that don't have the resources to hire and retain their own security coordinators so that we can help them fill a critically important need. I also want to talk for a couple of minutes around our work with overnight camping. And here I had a brief conversation with Tom, reflective of conversations I've had with a number of other members of this board over the last few months. You're aware that in our operating renewal, we eliminated portfolio consulting as a former operating model, and we applied that change also to the work of overnight camping. So the role that was previously filled by Jody Sperling doesn't exist at the association in the way that it used to, but we are fundamentally committed to moving beyond what I would call micro-support assistance and engagement with our overnight camps to raising the strategic risk of overnight camping as a field, 25 of them that populate the JCC movement, through the raising of the strategic bar around a host of different initiatives, including the launching of pilot benchmarking for overnight camping. We will be the first in the business to do that. Our pilot will happen this year in 2020, and a number of other initiatives that I will describe to you, if not today, over the course of time. The first biggest problem that I thought we wanted to resolve, if you'll go back one slide, one more, to this one, we have been relating to the independent agencies that are affiliated with JCC Association with far too many words. So we have always said we have JCCs, and we have independent agencies that affiliate with JCC Association that are in the main overnight camps that also do other things. That's a lot for a business card. what we have done is recategorize that group as Jewish community camps. So JCCs will reflect all the agencies that are affiliated with us. We'll draw the distinction where we need to draw that distinction, but whether it's Tamarack or New Jersey Y or Capital, they are a Jewish community camp, and therefore they fall under the nomenclature of what we say are Jewish community JCCs, Jewish community centers and camps, and we are working very hard to assure that we get the maximum amount of support out to all of those partner agencies. We have major partners from the field already, including the Foundation for Jewish Camp, which is around the corner from here, headed by Jeremy Fingerman. We are already a major beneficiary. The Weinberg Foundation out of Baltimore created a category of grants to strengthen camp's abilities on a physical level to support inclusion programs. They are awarding grants every year under the flag of Yashar, funded by Weinberg, facilitated by the Foundation for Jewish Camp. This year, of the 13 grants that were awarded, 9 went to our movement, totaling $1.3 million, and we ran the list of the beneficiaries there. It is indicative of the direction that we are going as we've raised our profile with our partner Jeremy Fingerman, who, by the way, will be a featured speaker at J-Summit in Milwaukee. We have also worked increasingly closely with the Harold Grinspoon Foundation and its camp program, J-Camp 180. They have a new director, Sarah Eisinger, with whom we met at length in Springfield around their most recent conference. Sarah is a remarkable talent, will also be with us in Milwaukee as a featured speaker, as will be Tom Rosenberg, who is the CEO of the American Camping Association, by the way, a former Jewish community camp director, Young Judea camp director, just saying. Tom is a great guy and has offered to bring significant ACA resources to bear for tailored support, training, and assistance to our 25 resident camps as a brand component of the work of the American Camping Association. And I've already alluded to the fact that we are launching a pilot for benchmarking for overnight camping in 2020. There will be 8 to 10 camps, both owned by JCCs and Jewish community camps, that will participate in that pilot. There are 150 Jewish overnight camps on the landscape. And if benchmarking for Jewish overnight camping proves as compelling to the camping world as it has in the JCC, the traditional JCC world, then we have a potentially significant source of new revenue as our product can be bought and utilized by Jewish community camps outside of our system once we get out of the gates. I want to talk a little bit, I don't know, how am I doing on time, Joanne? We're good? Go fast? All right, hold on a second. 3:32. Okay, here we go. I want to talk a little bit about partnering with funders. So I don't remember saying this, but somebody quoted me as saying that there's unlimited resources out there for the association and the Jewish community. We have been working very hard from the first day to reintroduce us as a platform and as an association to the world of Jewish funders. We have increasingly tried to establish JCC Association as a gateway for philanthropic investment across our platform, perhaps the most significant opportunity for strategic impact on the field by the world of philanthropy. And we have been increasingly viewing ourselves as the saloon doors that swing between our understanding of JCCs, what they do and what they could benefit from, and our understanding of major foundations and philanthropy, what they want to do and how the field could benefit from it, and have been cultivating relationship after relationship among many of those that you see on the screen and any number of others. It's early, but we're out of the gate, and I think it's very important to call your attention to the places where this is already beginning to bear fruit. We received the largest grant from the Safety, Respect, and Equity Coalition, $150,000 to launch a pilot on training in safety, respect, equity, leadership in 6 pilot communities. That's being spearheaded by Joy Brand Richardson. You can see the names of the communities that are on the flag in front of you, and as Gary mentioned earlier, we're going to hear from Nicole Navarez tomorrow as we orient this board to its responsibilities and the responsibility of lay leadership to the safety, respect, equity realities that we need to provide in our workplaces. I alluded to J on Wheels, which has already produced more than $65,000 in grants, a product of the 2019 Innovation Incubator. 4 more JCCs are launching this year. 5 additional JCCs are in the pipeline. The Maimonides Fund here in New York has been the funder. I alluded to the Z3 think tank. It was an $18,000 investment that grew out of the Innovation Incubator at last year's Executives Conference. And on November 11, 2019 in Palo Alto, these JCCs and their executives were present for a day-long workshop to determine how we could pursue the scaling of Zionism 3.0 as a replicable model in JCCs across the field. We're very excited about the fact that Lynn and the St. Louis JCC will be hosting the next JCC-based Zionism 3.0 conference on May 17th.
Exactly.
Looking forward to being there. I hope others will join us. And I can tell you that in the last days, we have been back to Maimonides with a preliminary report and a multi-million-dollar proposal to bring Zionism 3.0 to 25 JCCs over a 3-year period. We will keep you posted relative to how successful we're going to be there. We talked briefly about the program accelerator around Israel engagement. At our board meeting in October in Pittsburgh, we authorized $100,000, the first round of grants, to 10 JCCs. Again, you can see who the beneficiaries were. We have a $1.25 million fundraising appetite, which is triggering matching funding in every local community. We expect to make grants at a minimum of 2 times a year for 5 years. Our total fundraising has already eclipsed $500,000, and the beat goes down on the work that we're doing with each ensuing round, so we are out of the gate there. UJA Federation of New York this year made a $75,000 block grant so that Sheva and our early childhood team could do assessments and consultations with every JCC under the UJA Federation of New York umbrella. 21 of the 22 JCCs in New York have participated in both group and individual meetings with our people, including the 92nd Street Y and the Meyerson JCC of Manhattan. As we begin to evolve our engagement through the funds, in this case of UJA Federation of New York, it will invariably reap additional benefits to us in terms of additionally new affiliations. In the arts and culture world, we announced last year the launching of the Pertzik Center for Arts and Culture here on the back of a grant that in the end will total $750,000, but for which we have deployed already roughly $180,000 that has benefited 62 individual JCCs around gatherings, training, the creation of the first pass of a consulting faculty in arts and culture. We are preparing to re-grant funds out to the field around initiatives spawned by this, and you will see at J-Summit a far more substantial representation of what's happening with this particular grant. I alluded to the Crowns and to the Beta Z Shapiro initiative. In this year, $200,000 will be deployed. We've already held our think tank. These JCCs have been a part of it. And again, we see both support and resources that are going to flow from this organization out to the field. We have some long-standing initiatives that had to be refunded by major foundation partners. The Jack Joseph and Workman and Dell Foundation has continued its support of Kibunim, our training program for new executives. That's now an annual that we have to pursue on a renewed basis. You can see in 2019 and again in 2020 the number and specific JCCs that are reaping benefits from Kibunim. 2010. Those guys have been here a long time. They're coattailing. They're coattailing. All right, that's a. All right, listen. You know, it happens. Avichai, though, in their wind down now, in the last few months of their funding, again supported a grant for our Chizuk program, which is dedicated to strengthening professional educational capacity at camps. This is almost entirely devoted to spending money in and around camps, and you can see in 2019 and 2020 the individual camps that have benefited from that. We received a grant from the 92nd Street Y of $18,000 to advance a Woman in Power initiative that is devoted to providing senior-level women across all professional sectors with peer support, mentorship training, and coaching. 92Y and their people and outside resources were here as we gathered Women in Power from inlying JCCs as beneficiaries of this. And again, you get a sense of which of the JCCs took part. Our Merin Fellows were meeting last week out west. This is earnings on prior philanthropy, but $150,000 that are deployed this year to these individual JCCs as direct beneficiaries. And of course, the big one, which arrived in these last 2 years, was a nearly $2 million grant that came from the Jim Joseph Foundation that supported the 30 JCCs that are participating in the current cohort of Sheva Fellows. By the way, those senior fellows and their JCC executives will gather next month in San Francisco for a unique gathering and supported by this initiative. So I'm doing the rough math. It's not a single fiscal year. We're talking about 1.5 fiscal years or so. But I think we can take great pride in the fact that thus far, our effort to push resources in the field has produced, Joanne, almost $3 million in resources we are driving out to the field that have benefited, by my count, roughly 100 individual JCCs. It's the beginning. It's the beginning. But that's how it works with big philanthropy. First you begin and you get out the door and you provide satisfaction, and then you go back and there are more opportunities to come. You'll see it in the budget presentation tomorrow that Eric is going to make. But I think it's important to note that in 2018 we raised a total of $3.25 million from outside philanthropy. In 2019, in Jen's first year as the Chief Development Officer, we increased that number to nearly $4 million. So we're talking about a 25 to 30% increase in a single year, and that's while we're still bootstrapping ourselves into some semblance of order. It holds enormous promise. And here, the last major item that I wanted to bring to your attention today is an emerging effort that we are pursuing with mega philanthropy. I have been working opposite individual foundations, but particularly around a handful of foundations that like working together to see if we can get them to do for us what they have done in other sectors of the organized Jewish community. Hillel, going back now 20-odd years when Richard Joel arrived there as the CEO that really reinvented Hillel after it left the uncomfortable remaining auspices of B'nai B'rith in its time, helped to revitalize the Hillel network by first drawing the attention of the late Edgar Bronfman and Lynn Schusterman as early partners in strengthening their headquarters operation and drawing the credible attention of other funders. In the ensuing 2 decades and change, they have raised between $300 and $400 million from mega philanthropy that has underwritten a huge amount of the growth and expansion of local Hillels across the continent and actually around the world on the back of that credible first step. And I could draw a similar parallel to what happened at BBYO, also orphaned by B'nai B'rith when it could no longer provide for its needs, and also with the help of the Schustermans and a number of other foundations that are familiar names, renewed themselves under their current leadership. This has been the tenor of the conversation that we've had with as many as 6 or 7 of these mega foundations. So what I want to share with you is that on Tuesday morning, the day after tomorrow, the Jim Joseph Foundation and its CEO, Barry Feinstein, who many of you know very well, are hosting a breakfast with a small select group of leaders of this organization to discuss precisely this topic, to talk about the strategic landscape of North American Jewish life and the unique role that JCCs can play and the importance of an increasingly robust JCC association to enable that greater success to take place across the field. We were asked to provide some biographical insight about this organization and the leaders who carried the water in lean years here, and you know who you are. And then Jim Joseph decided who they wanted to invite to come to breakfast on Tuesday morning. It's a very compelling list. We will all be well represented there. Barry let me know the other day that we can count on the presence of a senior grant officer from the Schusterman Foundation out of DC and from the Maimonides Fund out of New York, and that they will be speaking with us in the name also of the Marcus Foundation out of Atlanta. No small thanks go to Lisa Brill, and the Giant Eagle Foundation out of Pittsburgh, and perhaps others as well. It will be a conversation about how we can follow the trail of breadcrumbs that was laid out by the Hillels and BBYOs of the world. It's not my meeting, and I don't own the agenda or how it's going to go, but what I anticipate is there will be a conversation about what the next 3 to 5 years might look like. There will be an indication that these foundations are readying to make a big investment in the association, and by way of the association in the field, there will be an opportunity for the long-standing leaders here to claim credit for getting the attention of mega philanthropy. There will be an opportunity for mega philanthropy to say that by coming to the table, they're going to be an opportunity to revitalize the continued commitment of long-standing leaders of this organization so that they can declare in partnership that they are going to resource the next new era. And I think the last thing I want to leave you with regard to this notion is it's a first round. So we're talking about 7-figure philanthropy here. But already what's been mentioned, and not by me, but by one of the foundations, was it's to tee up 9-figure philanthropy in support of the field. That's the story. 3 good years, and 18 months in, we're going to be talking about very serious money because we are unrivaled as a potential partner if we are credible and able to demonstrate that we've made the kind of headway that I'm confident that we're going to be able to make in these next few years. So I don't expect a big announcement on Tuesday of anything, but I do expect that conversation to bring us to a place where announcements could be made in the next few months. And that's what I am hoping for, and that I think is what we have been waiting for. And I can tell you that the only reason that we've arrived at this place is because the people in this room did the heavy lifting during good and not so good years, and brought us to a place where we could represent ourselves credibly and capably as the kind of partner that they are seeking. The people in this room and the JCC executives across the field who, by dint of their leadership in their local communities, have set us up to be the kind of partner that I believe we are set up to be. And for that, on behalf of all who will inevitably benefit from this, I extend a great deal of thanks to all of you for putting me in a position to play a small part in this process. So there's a lot more to say, and there isn't enough time to say it.
What about affiliation? Anything happening on affiliation?
Yeah. The last of the arrivals so far was the JCC of London, Ontario. It brings us down not only 2 Canadian JCCs that are still on the pipeline list of JCCs to renew affiliation. I can tell you that there are half a dozen other JCCs with which we are in active discussion about the timing of their rejoining. And I've gotten very encouraging initial feedback from the newly arrived CEO of the 92nd Street Y regarding an openness to begin that conversation again there as well. I'm encouraged, and I think the great part of the encouragement on this thing, David, is the fact that the 9 or 10 that have already renewed the affiliation did so before we started producing the kind of resources that we are indicating are coming down the pipe. I think once the big money starts coming in, anybody who's still on the outside will be beating down our door to get through it. But we should take some comfort in the fact that they're coming through before we've gotten that far out of the gate. So I'll simply remind us all, remind myself at this point, that the name of the game for us is greater Jewish community. That we have a unique responsibility, given the scope and breadth of our platform, for delivery on that promise. That the expectations here in 2020 are increasing demonstration of the things that we've been talking about aspirationally. A reminder, of course, that it's still the beginning, but we should be increasingly able to show that we've got capability to deliver and strengthen the work that we do in the field. The first meeting I had with the search committee when my candidacy was proposed here, I posed the question about what the comprehensive responsibility of this board was, or what it was perceived to be. And after we talked about all of the usual things about fiduciaries and overseeing a CEO and managing the basic operating design of the place, we talked for some time about whether or not this organization can and should legitimately say that it bears responsibility for the future of Jewish life on this continent. And we talked about whether anybody else out there was ready to say that they were doing that. I believe more today than I have at any time that that is fundamentally our responsibility. And I welcome as many others who want to share in that responsibility from the Jewish organizational world to be with us on that. But leadership means stepping out in front when nobody else is visibly in the lead, and I think we are it. The biggest and the broadest and the greatest potential. So for that, again, I thank you for honoring me with the chance to be in this role, and I look forward to a remarkable 2020.